Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into something that literally shifts how we think about the workplace. We're moving away from that old, tired paradigm of rigid HR compliance, the endless bureaucratic red tape, and stepping into something so much deeper. We're talking about the genuine human connection at the heart of management. If you've ever found yourself wondering what separates a pretty good manager from a truly unforgettable one, well, you're in the right place.
Here's our roadmap for today. We'll kick things off with policy, structure and scaffolding, then move into welfare and social security. After that, we'll dive right into stewardship, the managerial soul. Follow that up by navigating ethical dilemmas, and finally, we'll wrap things up with closure and reflection.
All right, let's jump straight into Section 1, Policy and Scaffolding, the Structure of HR.
When we hear the phrase HR policies, honestly, a lot of us just think of control, right? But really, these formal guidelines governing behavior, rights, and responsibilities are there to ensure consistency. Think of them not as a cage holding you in, but as scaffolding. Scaffolding holds the building up. It provides a safe, reliable structure, but crucially, it still allows for movement. True policies are actually designed to protect people, not just police them.
These policies form an absolutely vital foundation. They cover the whole shebang, from recruitment and training all the way down to discipline and termination. Now think about it. If a policy, say a leave policy, is vague, some people are going to take liberties while others hesitate to take time off at all. That leads to absolute confusion and, frankly, a lot of resentment. So a good policy in any of these areas has to be clear, fair, and above all, humane.
To really get the spirit behind a good policy, let's look at a remarkable anecdote from our source material. There was this textile unit owner, a grandfather, who insisted on paying his female workers the exact same wage as his male workers, way before any law actually mandated it. Why? Because he believed in dignity. He wasn't just ticking off a compliance box to keep the authorities happy. He was fundamentally upholding human worth.
Moving right along to Section 2, Welfare and Security, going beyond the basics.
So there is a pretty stark contrast between statutory and voluntary welfare. Statutory welfare is basically what's required by law. It's the bare minimum. Voluntary welfare, on the other hand, is offered purely by choice. And honestly, this is the secret sauce. Voluntary choices reflect what an organization truly values deep down. It proves to people that they are cared for far beyond what the legal department requires.
Let's bring this to life with another amazing story about that same textile unit owner. He voluntarily built a small clinic near his factory. Was it fancy? No. Was it required by the government? Not at all. But it saved lives. Simple, voluntary welfare like this creates an undeniable impact. It builds the kind of lasting, rock-solid employee trust that money literally cannot buy. Because at the end of the day, people remember care far more than they remember compensation.
This brilliantly highlights the real purpose behind Social Security schemes, like provident funds or state insurance. Sure, they protect against economic risks like illness, but more importantly, they act as emotional safety nets. They look an employee in the eye and say, "You matter," even when you're vulnerable. Good policies are essentially moral documents that communicate deep, genuine care.
Which brings us to Section 3, Stewardship, the Managerial Soul.
Let's define what we actually mean here. Stewardship is the ethical responsibility of managers to care for an organization's people, its resources, and its purpose. Notice the key word there, guardianship. Not control, guardianship. It involves long-term thinking, total transparency, and a deep empathy that honors dignity and justice. As a steward, you aren't just running a business unit. You are actively nurturing a community.
There's a fundamental difference between possessing something and responsibly guarding it. As the source material so perfectly puts it, a steward doesn't own, they hold. You don't own your team or your resources. You hold them in trust for a brief period of time, doing everything you can to ensure they thrive under your watch.
If we contrast leadership and stewardship side by side, it's pretty eye-opening. Leadership is so often about vision, influence, and hitting those big achievements. The classic leadership question is, where are we going? But stewardship, that focuses on care, accountability, and legacy. The steward asks a much more profound question: who are we becoming? It really forces us to consider not just our business goals, but the human growth that happens along the way.
So how do we actually put this stewardship into practice? Well, consider this beautiful little ritual. In that same textile unit, handing out a new employee's very first payslip wasn't just a cold transaction. It was done with a small ceremony. Think about that. It wasn't about the money at all. It was about welcome. It's rituals exactly like this that take dry, rigid policies and completely transform them into warm, human relationships.
Now, for Section 4, Navigating Ethical Dilemmas, the gray areas.
When we're navigating these tricky gray areas, there are basically 4 pillars that shape our ethical behavior. First, our personal values, which come from our upbringing. Second, the organizational culture, and pay close attention here, it's not what a company says on a poster, it's what is actually rewarded or ignored. Third, the legal frameworks that dictate what's permitted. And fourth, broader social expectations of fairness. Together, these form the quiet little compass we use when nobody else is watching.
Ethics begins where rules end. Wow. Our source text shares a story about a young intern who had her idea completely stolen by a colleague. The manager knew all about it but just turned a blind eye. Why? Because technically, taking credit wasn't strictly illegal. But come on, it was deeply unjust. This brilliantly illustrates that an action can be 100% legal and yet still fail every single test of ethical stewardship. To help make sense of this, we generally lean on 3 frameworks. The utilitarian lens looks for the greatest good for the greatest number of people. The rights-based lens is all about protecting individual dignity, and the justice-based lens zeroes in on fairness and equity. But remember, these are just lenses to look through. At the end of the day, the human heart still has to make the call. Because true ethical dilemmas are situations where values conflict, and honestly, no option feels entirely right. Think about it. Should you fire an underperforming employee who happens to be the sole breadwinner for their family? It's agonizing. We have to reframe these moments. Dilemmas are not math puzzles to solve with a perfect little formula. They are mirrors to hold up, revealing our true priorities as leaders.
And finally, Section 5, Closure and Reflection, Pausing the Journey.
Closure isn't simply an end. Actually, scratch that. It's a deliberate moment of reflection, gratitude, and release before the next journey even begins. The source material uses this wonderfully quiet imagery of lighting a small dia and folding a worn handkerchief as symbols of pausing. It's taking a breath to ask, what did this journey teach me? What did I protect, and what do I need to leave behind?
Think of it like this. Ethics is the thread, but closure is the knot. Throughout your entire career, your ethical choices are the thread that weaves your work together. But closure, that's the knot at the very end of that thread that secures the whole thing. The best managers learn to tie their experiences together with humility and hope. Which brings us to the end of our explainer today. And as we wrap up, I want to turn the lens directly onto you. Looking back at the scaffolding of your own policies, the emotional safety nets you provide to your team, and the ethics you practice when no one is watching, what will you carry forward? What kind of steward do you want to be? I'll leave you to reflect on that. Thanks so much for joining me, and keep learning.